Hey guys, tonight we descend into a world where nightmares didn't just haunt your sleep, they stalked you in daylight, chased heroes through temple corridors, and curled around the very roots of prophecy. We're heading into the shadows of ancient Greece, a place where monsters didn't just symbolize fear, they were fear. Tangible, snarling, venom dripping, and stone turning fear so naturally. You probably won't survive this beauty before you get comfortable. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from, so drop your location and your local time in the comments if you're still awake. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together while you're standing on the slopes of Mount Parnassus in the half-light of early morning. The air smells of crushed thyme, damp stone, and something older, something watching. Below, nestled like a secret, lies Delphi, the most sacred site in Greece, the navel of the world. And once upon a time, this holy place was no tourist attraction. It was guarded in OT by priests, not by marble lions, but by a monster meet python. No, not the cute kind that wraps itself politely around your arm at the petting zoo. We're talking about an ancient primeval serpent, massive, coiled, and semi-divine. Born of Gaia herself, according to myth, its coils wrapped around the belly of the earth, literally, and his hiss echoed through the valley like steam escaping a cracked amphora. Mainstream historical fact: Delphi was indeed considered the omphalos, the belly button of the earth. The Greeks believed it pulsed with spiritual energy, and before Apollo claimed it, the site was likely a place of earth goddess worship, centered on caves, springs, and, you guessed it, snakes. Python wasn't just some scaly bouncer. He was sacred. He represented ancient knowledge, primordial energy. He wasn't evil, just old and powerful. But enter Apollo, golden boy god of music, archery, and a level of confidence that could really use a therapist. He arrives as the new order of Olympus takes over the old earth cults, and he's not interested in sharing real estate. So what does Apollo do? He slays Python. Arrow after divine arrow pierces the serpent, until his enormous body rides its last along the cliffs of the Carishian cave. The blood soaks into the earth. The oracle's future is bought with violence. Quirky tidbit: after this brutal eviction, Apollo felt kinda bad about it. Divine PR wasn't great when you murdered a sacred snake. So he instituted the Pythian Games, a series of musical, athletic, and poetic contests held at Delphi every 4 years. Think of it as an ancient apology tour. Sorry, I killed your god. Here's a lyre competition. Historians still argue whether Python's myth represents an actual religious shift from matriarchal, nature-based worship to the more structured, patriarchal Olympian gods. Was it just a cool monster story? Or coded propaganda for a celestial regime change? You look down at the steaming spring of Castalia and wonder what the Pythia, the famed oracle, whispered to those who came seeking truth. She inhaled vapors from a crack in the ground, her eyes rolled back. Her voice echoed Python's cave. And what if? She never stopped channeling the serpent? What if Apollo never truly won? Even now, in your mind's eye, you hear a low, dragging hiss through olive branches. You picture coils thicker than tree trunks sliding over temple stones. You feel, just for a moment, very, very small. The air shifts. The vision passes, and you move in. There are deeper monsters ahead. You walk further now, past the last crumbling columns of Delphi, and into something far less sacred. There's no temple here, no prayer stones, just a gaping, root-choked cave in the side of a hill, and something inside is breathing. You don't hear it at first. You feel it, a low, guttural exhale, as if the earth itself were annoyed. Maybe hungry. Maybe both. This is where you meet Echidna, mother of monsters, which, in Greek mythology, is a lot more literal than it sounds. She wasn't just like a mother to monsters. She literally gave birth to most of them. According to myth, Echidna was half woman, half snake. Beautiful above the waist, serpentine below, and terrifying the whole way through. She was the maid of Typhon, the giant storm being will meet soon. Don't worry, he's saving a spot for you in a thundercloud. And together, they birthed some of the greatest hits of Greek monstrosity. Cerberus, her son. The Hydra, her daughter. The Chimera? Yep. Even the Sphinx, in some versions, is part of her extended reptilian family tree. It's basically a demonic PTA meeting that never ends. Mainstream historical fact. Greek mythology often used parentage as metaphor. Monstrous traits were rarely random. They came from somewhere. Creatures were born of cosmic unions, primal fears, or old-world deities that Olympus wanted you to forget. Echidna is one of those holdovers, a symbol of untamed nature, the wild world before gods gave it rules. That while you stand at the edge of her cave and imagine what it must have felt like to give birth to chaos. No bassinets, no lullabies, just acidic breath, claws, and a child who immediately tries to chew through its siblings. Quirky tidbit: Echidna herself doesn't get a ton of screen time in the myths. She's more of a behind-the-scenes figure, an original source of trouble. But there's one tale that says Zeus, wanting to avoid her kids overrunning the world, left her alive after defeating Typhon, but trapped her in a deep cave so her monstrous offspring could rise only occasionally. To spice things up, kind of like giving your toddler a blowtorch and saying, use it sparingly. Historians still argue whether Echidna and her brood represent primal, chthonic underground forces that predated the more orderly Olympian system. In other words, she's not bad, just inconveniently pre-Olympian. And while stories would have you believe she's been contained, her children suggest otherwise. Every time a monster rises in Greek myth, it's usually got her snaky fingerprints on it. The cave seems deeper than it should be. You step inside, just far enough to feel the air change. It smells damp and mineral-rich, like iron and soil and something older. The walls shimmer faintly, not with jewels, but with scales. Big ones, discarded ones. And then you hear it, the slow, rhythmic rasp of something coiling. She's here, or maybe just her memory. Maybe that's all it ever takes. Oh, you close your eyes and picture her, half beautiful, half terrifying. Not evil, not good. Just there, a mother to things the world wanted to forget. Indeed, the thought creeps in. Maybe monsters aren't born twisted. Maybe they're born from neglect, from power left unacknowledged, from gods who thought they could rewrite nature. Nature always remembers. And nature has children that while you step back from the cave mouth, not running, just respectfully retreating. The breathing fades, the quiet returns. Oh, you've met the source, beauty. The children are still waiting. You haven't walked far before you feel it, a strange, rising pressure in the air, like the wind is holding its breath. There's a hush to the landscape. Even the birds have stopped mid-song, as though something much larger has just turned its gaze toward you. Then, in the distance, you hear it. Not a roar, a howl of wind, so fierce and high-pitched it feels like the sky is being torn open. You stumble, pressing your hands over your ears, and when you lift your eyes, you see him. Typhon. While you weren't ready. No one ever is. Standing taller than the mountains, arms outstretched like wings of a storm. Typhon is the kind of creature you'd assume was exaggerated, except the Greeks were deadly serious about him. He wasn't just a monster. He was the monster, the final boss. The God-smasher. Mainstream historical fact. In the Greek mythological timeline, Typhon is considered the last great enemy of the Olympian gods. Born of Gaia again, she's got a type and Tartarus. Typhon was summoned as the god's punishment for imprisoning the Titans. He was meant to wreck everything Zeus built, and for a while, He nearly dead. Teaching myths describe him as vast and unshaped. 100 heads, fire for breath, snakes for legs, wings that blacken the sun. His voice was said to mimic every animal on earth, including human speech, which is frankly the most disturbing part. Imagine a mountain screaming in your own voice. You picture yourself at the foot of Mount Etna, where, according to later stories, Typhon was buried by Zeus after their clash. The volcano still smokes occasionally. Coincidence? Sure. Or maybe the old storm-blooded titan is just restless. Quirky tidbit. In one version of the myth, Typhon actually wins. He tears out Zeus's sinews and tosses them into a cave. The king of gods becomes a floppy, muscle-less jellyfish, and the other Olympians run away, literally transforming into animals to hide. Aphrodite becomes a fish. Hermes a bird. It's like divine hide and seek, but with significantly higher stakes that Zeus only recovers when Hermes sneaks into the cave, retrieves his ligaments, and glues the god back together, probably muttering, "This is so not in my job description." Historians still argue whether Typhon represents more than just brute strength. Some believe he symbolizes natural disasters, earthquakes, storms, eruptions. Others say he's the personification of chaos itself. Not evil, just untamed. And when the gods defeated him, it was less about good triumphing and more about order being imposed, violently, on a wild and living world. You can't help but feel a little bad for him. I mean, yes, he did try to wipe out civilization, but also, Zeus kind of started in another tale. Typhon fathers monsters even after his defeat. Cerberus, the Chimera, even the Sphinx are sometimes said to descend from him. You get the impression that he's not so much dead as waiting. That kind of rage doesn't evaporate. It coils under mountains. It stirs in fault lines. You imagine the ground beneath your feet rumbling, not a quake, but a heartbeat. Slow, heavy, patient. There's an old story that says if Typhon ever rises again, even the gods will hide. They're not immortal because they can't be hurt. They're immortal because they're terrified. Or you glance at the sky, half expecting it to flicker red with lightning, but all is calm again. For NOW.YOU walk on, reminded that Greek mythology didn't just invent monsters for shock value. It used them to explain things that terrified and humbled the ancient world. Storms, eruptions, loss, the unpredictable parts of nature that gods couldn't always control, and neither can YOU. Still, a little voice in your head wonders, what if Typhon isn't gone? What if he's just dreaming? There's a chill now, unnatural, like the air itself is holding its breath. You step through a grove of twisted olive trees, their branches bare despite the season, their bark scratched as if something tried to claw its way out. The ground beneath your feet crunches, but not with leaves, with stone. Small statues, broken figures, scattered, frozen screams. You reach the edge of a clearing where silence itself feels dangerous. In the center, barely illuminated by moonlight, stands the figure you've been warned about since childhood. Medusa in aurors. No wings. Just a woman, beautiful, maybe once. Now, her hair rides. Not poetically, literally. Each strand is a serpent, flickering its tongue, tasting your fear. Her face is not monstrous, exactly. That's what makes it worse. It's human enough to feel familiar, uncanny enough to freeze you where you stand. And the worst part? She doesn't look at you. Not YET. Mainstream historical fact. The myth of Medusa wasn't always about evil. In the earliest versions, she wasn't even born a monster. She was a mortal priestess of Athena, famed for her beauty. Until, depending on the story, you believe either she was seduced or assaulted by Poseidon inside Athena's temple. And Athena, clearly the wrong goddess to offend, didn't blame Poseidon. She blamed Medusa. So, the punishment? transformation. Hair into snakes, face into a death sentence. From that moment on, anyone who looked at her turned to stone. Not because she wanted them to, but because she had no choice. Quirky tidbit. Ancient Greek warriors used to paint Medusa's face, the Gorgonion, on their shields and armor. Not because they loved her, but because they feared her. It was a way to turn the monster's curse into a weapon, which is kind of like using a security alarm sticker from a house you robbed. Historians still argue whether Medusa was always intended as a cautionary tale or a misunderstood symbol of female rage. Was she a villain or a victim? Was she meant to terrify you or protect you from something far worse? You take a step forward and feel the crunch of another statue underfoot. This one still has a face. Eyes wide, mouth open, a silent scream locked in marble. You wonder who he was. A soldier? A thief? A man with too much curiosity and not enough mirrors? Yes, mirrors, because that's how Perseus defeated her. Not by strength, by indirection. He looked at her reflection in a polished shield, swung his sword without turning his eyes, and beheaded her while she slept. Heroic? Maybe. Cowardly? Possibly. Effective? Unfortunately, even in death, Medusa wasn't done. When Perseus sliced off her head, two creatures leapt out from her neck: Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, a warrior born fully grown and armed. It's not clear how two full beings fit inside her, and frankly, let's not ask. The Greeks didn't explain everything. Some monsters were wombs of other monsters. That's just how it worked, and Perseus didn't bury the head either. He carried it with him, like a magical grenade. Used it to turn enemies into statues. Passed it to Athena, who mounted it on her shield. That face, contorted, suffering, powerful, became divine property. While you pause, standing across from the clearing where her ghost might still prowl, and wonder, why is it always the woman who's blamed for being cursed? Why does the victim become the warning? The answer, of course, is too old to be carved in stone. While you exhale slowly, not wanting to make a sound, and begin to walk backward, careful not to turn your back. Her eyes don't glow. There's no roar, but you feel them. Somewhere between tragic and terrifying, Medusa lingers. Not because she wants revenge, because she never got closure. The path turns rocky beneath your feet, leading you through a canyon scorched and cracked, as though something with fire in its belly had been pacing restlessly. The sky here feels lower, closer. You can taste smoke in the wind, sweet and sulfurous, like a campfire built by someone who's never heard of marshmallows. This is Chimera country. While you reach a bend and peer over the ridge. There it is, a hulking shape, crouched near a fissure in the earth that breathes steam like an irritated tea kettle. The chimera raises its head, a lion's face, regal and furious, framed by a mane that flickers like coals. Then, from its back, a goat's head emerges, leading with a sound that somehow manages to be menacing. And if that's not enough, its tail is a living, hissing serpent, curling toward you as if it knows you're watching. Not subtle, not elegant, just a biological dare. Mainstream historical fact. The chimera appears in early Greek myth, most notably in the Iliad, where it's described as a thing of immortal make, not human, lion-fronted and snake behind, a goat in the middle, and snorting out the breath of the terrible flame of bright fire, which is both weirdly specific and still somehow vague. It was said to haunt the region of Lycia, modern-day Turkey, burning fields, devouring livestock, and generally being a poor neighbor. Until the hero Bellerophon showed up, riding the newly born Pegasus, and speared it from above. You know, the usual flying horse versus goat lion snake scenario. Quirky tidbit. Some scholars believe the chimera may be an allegory for a volcano. The region it's associated with, Lycia, is home to natural gas vents and flaming mountains like Mount Chimera, which still spews fire from rocky holes. Hikers have even roasted marshmallows over it. Myth made mildly delicious. Historians still argue whether the chimera was always a single creature or a category of monsters. Some ancient vase paintings show variants with different animal combos. A bear, chicken, scorpion? Why not? Greek mythology wasn't constrained by zoology, but what's most fascinating is how the chimera endures, not just as a beast, but as a word. Chimeric now means something fantastical, made from incompatible parts. A dream, or a nightmare, while you edge closer and feel the heat, palpable, dry, and curling your hair slightly. The chimera doesn't look your way. It simply exists, exhaling flame in the general direction of an unlucky bush, which promptly combusts while you wonder how such a creature survives. Eats. Sleeps. Whether the lion fights the goat for dominance. Whether the snaketail gets bored and bites the rest out of spite. No myths go into that level of detail. Sadly, there's something charming, unsettling, about how the chimera is unapologetically wrong. Nature says pick one head. The chimera says have three. It doesn't care about symmetry. It doesn't care about logic. It just is, and maybe that's the real reason it unnerves people, because in a world that wants things labeled, the chimera can't be boxed. It refuses to be one thing. It breathes fire, it bleats, it roars, and it slithers all at once. And if that makes you uncomfortable, well, you came into its canyon. Wind picks up carrying sparks, and you decide, wisely, to keep moving. You've seen enough hybrids for one night. But you know the lesson lingers. Not all monsters hide in shadows. Some burn, brightly and openly, with no shame at all. The canyon path narrows until you're squeezing between jagged walls, your fingertips brushing against stone as warm as skin. You emerge onto a ledge overlooking the sea, dark, endless, and sighing against the rocks far below. And there, just offshore, rises a strange outcropping of stone. Not a true island. Not quite land. More like a trap set by the gods, where you found Scylla and Charybdis. Technically two monsters, but always paired like a tragic double feature. You look right, there's Charybdis. An enormous whirlpool, circling with steady menace. The surface churns as if a mouth lies beneath it, yawning open. Ancient sailors believe she swallowed the sea 3 times a day, dragging entire ships into the dark. A stomach that never stayed full. To your left? Scylla, perched in the cliffside, hidden in shadow, until she moves. 6 serpent necks dart out of the rock, each tipped with a snapping dog's head, all teeth and hunger. They whip and twist and vanish again. She's part of the stone, or maybe was the stone, or maybe once human. The myths disagree, as usual. Mainstream historical fact. The strait between Italy and Sicily, now known as the Strait of Messina, was truly treacherous. Strong tidal currents, submerged rocks, sudden storms. Sailors needed an explanation, and the Greeks provided one. 2 monsters, one on either side, between whom you had to sail directly. This gave rise to the classic phrase, between Scylla and Charybdis. The original, stuck between a rock and a hard place. Literally. Quirky tidbit. One version of the myth claims Scylla was once a beautiful nymph. But when she caught the eye of a sea god, another jealous sorceress or goddess, details very poured a potion into her bathing pool. Next thing she knew, legs were replaced with howling dog heads, and spa day was officially over. Historians still argue whether these monsters were based on real phenomena, underwater caverns, sudden currents, optical illusions, or purely symbolic. Were they the ancient world's way of processing impossible choices? Sacrifice a few to Scylla's jaws or risk the whole ship in Charybdis's swirling maw. Either way, you're standing where no one wants to be, in the in-between. You can almost feel the pull of Charybdis from here. That low, repetitive thrum, like the sea's heartbeat. And Scylla? She's watching. You can tell. Not cruel. Just hungry. Like a stray dog that's learned to expect nothing but scraps. So you picture yourself as Odysseus, forced to choose. In Homer's tale, he picked Scylla. 6 men lost, 1 to each snapping maw. But the rest of the ship survives. Pragmatic. Awful. Very Greek. Thec wind tugs at your clothes, and you shiver, not from cold, but from choice. The ancient Greeks loved a dilemma with no right answer. That was the point. Monsters weren't just physical. They were moral exercise where you sit for a moment and watch the tide. Let the waves rock your thoughts like a ship on the brink. You imagine sailing through that pass, knowing you can't dodge both sides, that something will be lost. That survival means choosing your own disaster. Not every monster can be fought. Some just have to be navigated. And even that, it's never safe. You leave the cliffs behind, and the air begins to grow. Sticky. Not from heat, but from an atmosphere you can't quite name. It's the feeling of walking into a story too strange to be real, and too ancient to be fiction. The ground softens beneath your feet, grassy, golden, unnervingly still. Nothing moves here. Nothing dares. Ahead lies an enormous open plain, dotted with glints of bronze half buried in the soil. At first, you think it's broken armor. Then you realize it's not broken. It's still wearing itself. You found Talos, the bronze giant. He doesn't lumber toward you. He doesn't stomp. He stands, motionless at first, like a forgotten statue. But then, one massive arm creaks and lifts, joints grinding like millstones. His eyes glow faintly red. Not from magic, more like dying embers, reluctant to go out. Mainstream historical fact. Talos comes from Cretan mythology and was described as a man of living bronze, gifted or cursed with a single vein that ran through his entire body, sealed with a nail at the ankle. He was built, depending on which myth you pick, by the gods or by Hephaestus himself, the divine blacksmith. And he had one job: guard the island of Crete. He patrolled its shores, circling the island 3 times a day, ready to hurl boulders at unwelcome ships. Ancient security system, no subscription required. Quirky tidbit: the way Talos killed intruders wasn't subtle. He would heat his bronze body until it glowed and then wrap his victims in a literal bear hug, cooking them like a rotisserie chicken of mythological proportions. It's like being hugged by a toaster the size of a barn. Historians still argue whether Talos was meant to be a relic of older automaton myths or a symbol of advancing tech anxiety. Some think he was inspired by early experiments with mechanical statues. Others argue he represents a kind of primitive AI, obedient, powerful, and one nail away from total failure. You circle cautiously. He doesn't move again. His single vein, a symbolic vulnerability, is hidden, but your thoughts drift to that ankle. That one flaw. It's always the ankle with ancient heroes and monsters. Why never the elbow? According to myth, Talos was eventually defeated by Medea, who either tricked him into removing the nail or used sorcery to rupture the vein. As soon as the ichor, the divine blood of the gods, spilled out, he collapsed. An ancient crash. Not in sparks, but in silence. While you stand before him now, and it hits you, he was never evil. He didn't roar or chase or curse. He simply did his job until someone told him to stop. A mechanical monster, yes, but also a kind of tragic relic. Built for protection. Used for isolation. Misunderstood like so many others. Wind whistles through the gaps in his bronze plating. You imagine him patrolling this island alone, day after day, year after year. Never asking why. Just guarding. Monsters of Greek myth aren't always twisted souls. Sometimes they're just tools given too much power and not enough purpose. While you leave the field, glancing back one last time. His eyes no longer glow. But for a moment, you could swear his head turned slightly. A farewell? Or just a machine remembering it used to move? You step into a different kind of darkness now, not the shadowed cliffs of Scylla, nor the smoke-wreathed air around the Chimera. This blackness feels deeper, older, like the mouth of the world itself yawning open. The ground is jagged and moist. Moss squishes under your boots. Fungi pulse faintly along the cave walls, their glow a cold blue-green, casting just enough light to let you know you're not alone, and you aren't. Because far ahead, looming like a mountain hunched over in sleep, you see the Hydra. At first, it seems like one serpent, huge, sleek, coiled atop itself like a pile of wet rope. But then it lifts one head, then two more, then five, and you lose count after 8. Each moves independently, sniffing the air, tasting it with forked tongues. Their eyes don't glow. They don't need to. You already know they see you. Mainstream historical fact. The Lernaean Hydra was said to dwell in the swamps near Lake Lerna, a real place in the Peloponnese. In the myth, it was Heracles' second labor, and arguably one of his most frustrating. Every time he chopped off one head, 2 more grew in its place, while you feel a headache coming just thinking about it. The trick, of course, was fire. His nephew Iolaus helped him cauterize each neck after cutting, which is another way of saying Greek mythology is a team sport. Heracles gets the credit, but someone else always brings the lighter. Quirky tidbit. Some versions say the Hydra's breath was poisonous, and its blood so venomous that even its tracks killed plants. After slaying it, Heracles dipped his arrows in the blood. So basically, he turned it into a portable war crime. Historians still argue whether the Hydra represented disease, maybe cancer, maybe plague, or was a metaphor for problems that multiply the more you fight them. Think bureaucracy, or group chats. What's clear is that the Hydra doesn't chase. It waits, a predator by patience. When you step closer, one head cocks sideways, curious, not snarling, just observing. Another lowers toward the earth and sniffs near a bone pile, confirming your suspicion. Something tried to come through here. It did not leave. While you crouch, watching the way the heads move. Not randomly, strategically, like a chorus of predators that learn choreography. You could dodge one, maybe 2, but 6, 10, 12, they don't hiss in unison. They think in unison. Indy, here's the real kicker. The Hydra doesn't hate you. It has no grudge, no vendetta. It just exists. Like a bad habit made flesh. You cut it off, it returns. You fight it, it grows. You try to escape, it waits. A mythological metaphor for life's most persistent problems, while you pause beside a stone where a head once rested. The scales have left an imprint, like an immense, scaly pillow, weirdly domestic. You almost feel bad for it. Then you remember, this thing killed anything that moved. Still, it wasn't evil. It was biological inevitability. A concept that doesn't care about feelings. There's a reason the Hydra wasn't just a dragon. It was many dragons. Together. One neck hisses softly, its breath humid and sharp with something acrid. You step back. Some monsters teach. Others warn. But the Hydra? It reminds you that some problems must be solved together, or not at all. You emerge from the swamp slowly, your legs heavy as though they've absorbed the humidity, the poison, the sheer exhaustion of just witnessing the Hydra. But the air shifts now, cooler, clearer, and tinged with something unfamiliar. Salt, yes. But also song. High, melodic, inhumanly perfect. Indie. That's how you know you're in trouble. The beach is quiet, too quiet. Waves lap the shore without sound. No birds, no insects. Just that song, floating across the water, as if someone were humming directly inside your thoughts. Welcome to the world of the sirens, no mermaids. That's the first thing modern myths get wrong. The sirens weren't shimmering beauties with fishtails and seashell brass. In their oldest forms, they were bird-bodied, human-faced, and sharp-taloned, perched on jagged rocks like feathered predators waiting for curiosity to kill the captain. Mainstream historical fact. The sirens appear most famously in Homer's Odyssey, where Odysseus sails past them, but not without precautions. He has his men plug their ears with wax and tie him to the mast so he can hear their song without steering the ship into ruin, which is basically the Bronze Age version of letting your Spotify play while someone else drives. Quirky tidbit. Some versions claim that if a sailor heard the sirens and survived, the sirens themselves would die from shame, which makes them possibly the only mythological creatures powered by performance anxiety. Historians still argue whether the sirens were ever meant to be seductive in the modern sense. Their allure was less about desire and more about knowledge. Their songs were said to reveal secrets, truths about the world so profound they unmade sanity. Imagine Googling the entire internet with your ears all at once. Tempting? Sure. Fatal? Definitely. You step onto the sand, and though you can't see them, you feel them watching. The cliffs above are sharp, white, stained in streaks of reddish-brown. Ships didn't sink gently here. They shattered. A broken mast juts from the shore like a warning tooth. Nearby, barnacle-covered bones rest in the sand, fingers curled inward. You wonder if the last sound this sailor heard was beautiful enough to be worth it. Titchy music rises. Not louder, but deeper. You feel it in your chest. Like it's singing not to you, but as you. Thoughts bubble up uninvited, regrets, half-memories, questions you didn't ask. Their voices aren't luring you toward romance. They're pulling you toward understanding. The kind of understanding that ends with a shipwreck. You squint toward the cliffs and catch a glimpse, just one, of a shape. Wings spread wide, face solemn, eyes ancient. Then it's gone again, lost in the crags. You realize the sirens don't just sing to you. They become what you most want to hear. For Odysseus, it might have been glory. For you, maybe rest, maybe answers, or maybe just a voice telling you, finally, that it's okay to stop fighting the current. You turn your head. You're not Odysseus, but you've heard enough bedtime stories to know when not to listen. The sand crunches beneath your feet as you walk backward, not running. You don't cover your ears while you let the song fade. Like a dream that doesn't want to be remembered. And as the sea hushes behind you, you think, some monsters don't eat you. They just convince you to jump. The siren song lingers in your ears like the aftertaste of a strange fruit, sweet, haunting, impossible to name. But the terrain is changing now. The sea fades behind you, and the earth begins to rise. Craggy hills stretch upward into steep slopes, and the smell of ash grows stronger with every step. Then, without warning, the sky darkens, not with clouds, but with wings. A shadow so vast it swallows the sun. You look there she is. Echidna, not a creature of the skies exactly, but her children often are. This is the mother of monsters, and her presence feels less like an encounter and more like a revelation. You don't see her all at once. You glimpse her in parts. A coil of immense serpent tail wrapped around a dead tree. A glint of scales that shimmer like oil. And then, above the rise, a woman's torso, tall as a tower, her skin gleaming with a soft, golden hue that somehow still feels toxic. Her hair moves like seaweed in slow water. Her eyes? Closed. But you know she's aware of YOU. Mainstream historical fact. Echidna is said to be half woman, half snake, a monstrous mother figure who birthed many of the most infamous creatures of Greek myth, including the Chimera, Cerberus, the Hydra, and the Nemean lion. Her consort? None other than Typhon, a storm beast so terrifying he once challenged Zeus himself to. So yes, Family dinners were probably intense. Quirky tidbit. Despite being called the mother of all monsters, Echidna herself isn't featured in many stories. She's more like a dark background figure, always referenced, rarely explored. One account claims she lived alone in a cave and ate passersby. Another suggests she was beautiful above the waist so she could lure people in. Historians still argue whether Echidna was ever meant to be interpreted literally, or if she represented something more primal, chaos, fertility gone wrong, or the ancient Greek fear of untamed nature. A goddess they didn't worship, but couldn't ignore while you step closer, and a shiver runs up your spine. Not from fear exactly, from scale, from the way her existence warps the ground around her. Flowers wilt, stones crack. It's not that she hates life, it's just that she's incompatible with it. A hiss, not from her, but from the earth itself, slips through the rocks. Her tail uncoils slightly. She still hasn't opened her eyes. You wonder what would happen if she did eat while you take another step, and in that moment, you realize she isn't alone. Each ground rumbles softly. There, on the hillside, a pile of rocks moves. A three-headed pup stirs in its sleep. Cerberus, still a child here, twitching its ears, one head yawning, another dreaming, the third licking its paws. This is a nursery. A nightmare nursery. And you? Just another tourist with too much curiosity. Echidna tilts her head. Not threatening. Just acknowledging. You get the sense that if you linger too long, she'll test your composure. Not by roaring or striking or chasing, but by simply being. Because you weren't meant to witness creation this raw, this monstrous, this maternal, while you bow your head slightly, out of instinct more than respect. She does not respond, and so, carefully, quietly, you begin to descend the other side of the slope, Echidna fading behind you like the tail end of a bad dream that you can't quite shake. Some monsters are born. Others are born from. And some? They do the birthing. The descent takes longer than you expect. Your feet crunch gravel and old bones as the hills soften into a dusty plain, the kind that holds heat even after the sun dips below the horizon. But the air isn't warm now. It's cold. Not wind chill cold. Breathes down your neck cold. And it's not empty either. Something is pacing. While you feel it before you hear it. The soft thud of padded feet. A low, rhythmic growl that you don't so much hear as feel in your ribs. You stop walking. The sound stops. The thin movement. Swift, graceful. Too many legs. We just crossed into the domain of the Sphinx, the Egyptian one, perched stoically in the sand with its cryptic smile. This is the Greek Sphinx. Female, feral, fascinated by riddles, and absolutely the last thing you want to meet if you're in a hurry. Mainstream historical fact. The Greek Sphinx was famously said to guard the road to Thebes. She posed riddles to travelers, and anyone who answered incorrectly was promptly eaten. Like a game show, but with way worse consequences. Your most famous riddle. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? You may know the answer now. It's man. But imagine being asked that under pressure, with claws inches from your throat, and no lifeline to phone a friend. Quirky tidbit. Some depictions of the Sphinx show her with wings, feathered and enormous, like an eagle's, and the tail of a serpent. Others say she was the daughter of Typhon and Echidna. So yes, if you've been paying attention, this is a legacy monster. Historians still argue whether the Sphinx's riddles were purely literary inventions or reflected older, ceremonial trials. Was she a real myth or a metaphor for initiation? For women as gatekeepers of knowledge? For the ancient belief that wisdom and danger often came in the same package? You crouch behind a boulder, peering into the dark. The Sphinx is out there. You know she is. The silence is too intentional. Then a voice, soft, amused, purring like velvet over glass. Do you know what has one name, but breaks in many places? You freeze till your question hangs there, heavy, demanding. It's not just a riddle. It's a test. You could answer. You want to. That's her trap. Not just claws or teeth, but the urge to prove yourself worthy of passing. Her weapon is your ego. You don't respond. A shadow ripples across the stones, long tail swaying, wings folded neatly against her back, leonine shoulders tensing as she circles just outside your sightline. Her voice returns, this time closer. Silence can be clever, or cowardly, charming. You think of the people who must have stood right here centuries ago, merchants, warriors, children, and realize they had only one chance to impress a myth. And you? You're smarter than that. You stay quiet. The Sphinx exhales. Not a sigh. A smirk, and just like that, she pads back into the dark. While you don't win a prize. You don't even know if you pass. But sometimes, the best move is knowing when not to play. While you keep walking. The road narrows again, but not into cliffs or caves. Instead, you're suddenly threading your way through ruins, broken columns, shattered mosaics, temples cracked open like eggshells. Marble lions lie headless. Statues weep from hollow sockets. This isn't just decay. This is aftermath, and somewhere beneath it all, beneath the dirt, the stone, the silence, something still breathes while you're in the presence of Typhon. Or at least, what's left of it. While you've probably never seen something that used to be a storm. But that's the feeling here. Like a cyclone wandered through history, took one look at humanity's fragile cities, and decided to stomp its foot just once to remind everyone who's boss a mainstream historical fact. Typhon was, quite literally, the storm god's storm. Described in Hesiod's Theogony as the most fearsome monster of all time, he had 100 serpent heads, each breathing fire and screaming in different languages. He challenged Zeus for control of the cosmos. And for a terrifying moment, it wasn't clear who would win. Quirky tidbit. Some stories say Typhon was so tall, his head scraped the stars. Others describe his legs as coils of serpents, his arms as dragons, and his voice a cacophony of animal screams. Honestly, it's like someone dumped every mythological creature into a blender and hit monstrous smoothie. Historians still argue whether Typhon was meant as a literal threat or as a cosmic metaphor, representing chaos, revolution, or even volcanoes. Mount Etna in Sicily was said to be his tomb, with his rage causing its eruptions. A monster you don't see but occasionally feel while you pause among the ruins. There's a wind here, but it doesn't come from the sky. It gusts from below, from fissures in the earth that pulse with heat, from vents in broken statues where no breath should emerge, from places where reality has been scorched. And though you know Typhon was defeated, buried beneath a mountain, chained in Tartarus, pick your myth, you also know that monsters like him don't die. They sleep, they simmer, they wake up while you kneel beside a piece of engraved stone. The letters are scorched halfway through, like someone tried to erase history with lightning. Or maybe just anger. And in that moment, you wonder, what if he's still here? What if this plain of ruins is not his tomb, but his ribcage? What if you've been walking through the hollow chest of the world's most dangerous creature, and he's dreaming of the day he gets to rise again? You step back. Slowly, your breath makes clouds in the hot air. That's how strange this place is. Cold lungs, warm wind, broken stones that whisper if you lean close enough. You don't. Instead, you glance once more at the horizon, where Mount Etna smolders faintly in the distance. Then you keep moving. Not because you're brave, but because stopping here means surrendering to something too big, too angry, and too old to understand you. And Typhon? He doesn't need to understand why you do it, just needs you to be in the way. The earth cools as you walk. Your boots leave prints in dust that's no longer scorched, but ancient, soft like ash sifted through centuries. You're climbing again, this time into a quieter kind of danger that there's no wind here. No breath of typhon. No riddle song from a sphinx. Just stillness. Stillness and a scent in the air like metal and regret. You're entering the domain of Medusa not the fashionably misunderstood icon of later retellings. Not the symbol of feminine rage version that you've seen on tote bags. No, this is Medusa the monster, at least, as the ancient Greeks feared her. The kind of creature whose gaze didn't hurt your feelings. It calcified your soul at mainstream historical fact. Medusa was one of the three Gorgons, and the only one who was mortal. According to the myth, she was once a beautiful maiden, until she was transformed, depending on the version, either by Athena's curse or as punishment after being assaulted in a temple. Either way, the result was this: serpents for hair, and a gaze that turned people to stone. Quirky tidbit. Some versions claim the snakes in her hair whispered to her, acted as scouts, even bit people who got too close. Others suggest she had boar's tusks, bronze hands, and wings. You never quite know which Medusa you'll get. Gorgon roulette. Historians still argue whether Medusa was always meant to be a villain, or whether her story was corrupted over time to justify her murder by Perseus. Was she a symbol of divine wrath, female power, trauma personified? The debate's still hissing that you find her lair by accident, which feels poetic. A wrong turn in a dead grove. Trees frozen mid-sway. Leaves curled in petrified stillness. And among them, statues. Dozens. No pedestals. No plaques. Just victims that one man's arms are raised in surrender. Another leans mid-step, forever braced for a blow that never came. A horse rears. A child covers her face. Stone, all of them. And all of them staring toward the same shadowed ruin in the center of the grove. You don't want to look. But you do. It's not that you see her. It's that you know she's seen not because your muscles lock up. Not because your skin hardens because your thoughts go suddenly quiet kind of quiet that makes you forget what sound snakes, when you finally hear them, are small. Delicate. They hiss to each other like siblings, like gossips, like nerves you didn't know you had. You close your eyes, because you remember the trick. Don't look. Beauty, that's not easy, is it? Not when something terrifying is also lonely. Not when the sound of those snakes starts to resemble whispers, saying things that sound like secrets. Regrets. Familiar fears. They twist the air around your head like lullabies. You stay still, eyes shut, and slowly, carefully, you begin to back away. You don't run. You don't breathe loud. You let her fade like a nightmare slipping from memory. Not because she's harmless, but because maybe, just maybe, she's tired. Some monsters scream. Others weep. And some just want to be forgotten. You walk now with a kind of reverence, not just for the monsters you've met, but for yourself. The self that somehow still exists after passing so close to legends, curses, God's leftovers. But your journey isn't done. The sky grows dimmer again, not from clouds or dusk, but from distance, as if light itself hesitates to follow where you're headed. A wind picks up, cold, damp, faintly smelling of mildew and old bronze, while you're approaching the mouth of a cave. Not just any cave, the cave. The one few heroes returned from. The one even God sealed off when they could die. Welcome to the lair of the Chimera. It doesn't greet you. It doesn't need to. Its presence greets everything. A warmth creeps across your face, dry, crackling warmth like standing too close to an oven. And though you haven't seen it yet, you can already feel the shape of the thing in the dark. Mainstream historical fact. The Chimera is described in Homer's Iliad as a fire-breathing beast with the front of a lion, the back of a serpent, and the middle of a goat. That's not a typo. Goat. right in the middle, just vibing. You'd think it was a mythological typo, but no, ancient art backs this bizarre fusion. Quirky tidbit. In some depictions, the goat head isn't just growing from the chimera's back, it's also alive, bleeding furiously while the lion snarls and the serpent tail hisses. Imagine trying to fall asleep next to that. Ancient Greek monsters were less about elegance and more about maximum chaos per square inch. Historians still argue whether the chimera was inspired by real animal sightings, say, fossils, or natural deformities, or whether it was entirely symbolic. Some say it represented natural disasters, volcanoes, drought, plague, bundled together into one three-headed catastrophe. The cave pulses with heat. You step carefully over blackened bones and fragments of charred armor. No statues here. No riddles. Just ASH then, from the darkness, a low growl, followed by a sharp bleat, and finally, a hiss that seems to steam the air. You freeze. Your eyes adjust just enough to glimpse movement, a lion's paw, massive and scarred, emerging from the shadows. Behind it, a sinewy goat's neck cranes upward, eyes clouded but alert. And trailing along the cave floor, like a bad idea slithering toward its conclusion, is the serpent tail. Fangs wet with venom. Flickering, the chimera doesn't charge. It doesn't roar. By judges, while you're not a hero with a spear. You're not Bellerophon riding Pegasus, aiming for glory. You're a bedtime traveler with tired legs and no business being here. And the chimera? It knows. Still, it lets you stand there. Long enough to feel the heat. Long enough to see the black scorch marks on the cave walls, old as empire, fresh as fear. Long enough to decide you're done. You bow your head, not in reverence, but in thanks. Not for your safety, but for the privilege of witnessing something so ridiculous and terrifying it almost loops back around to majestic. While you take one step back. Then another. The chimera does not follow. Some monsters demand a fight. Others? They already know they've won. You leave the chimera behind without looking back. Partly because you've learned your lesson, and partly because something in you whispers that if you did, you'd find those three heads staring after you, lion, goat, and snake, all wearing the same expression, bemused disappointment, as if they expected more of you, as if they've seen it all before. The path winds downward once more, into damp lowlands where fog curls along the ground like sleeping cats. Your body aches, not from wounds, but from proximity, like you've been dipped in mythology and haven't quite dried off yet. And that's when you hear the humming. Not a song, not language, just a deep, resonant hum that feels OLD while you follow it, like you followed everything else tonight, and soon you see her. Scylla does it, not on a cliff here, not guarding a strait, not opposite Charybdis. No whirlpool to trap ships, no narrow pass. Just her, standing silently in the mist, and the terrible, beautiful shapes that emerge from around her waist. The mainstream historical fact. Scylla, according to Homer and later writers, was once a beautiful nymph until she was transformed by jealousy or divine wrath, depending on who you ask. Her lower body became a horror of snapping dog heads, tentacles, or serpent-like limbs. She devoured sailors not out of malice, but because that's simply what she was. NOW. Quirky tidbit. In some versions, she had 12 limbs and 6 barking dog heads growing from her hips. In others, she had fish scales, dolphin tails, or crab claws. One poet even describes her barking heads as yapping like puppies, which, let's be honest, makes it worse. Historians still argue whether Scylla and Charybdis were originally separate myths or evolved together as nautical metaphors. Were they literal monsters, or allegories for rocky coastlines and whirlpool sailors feared long before maps existed? You approach Scylla slowly. She doesn't move. Her upper half is still strangely beautiful, hair caught in a wind that isn't there, eyes staring past you, like she's lost in thought or memory. But around her waist, The creatures twitch and stretch. Long necks, jaws with too many teeth, slick forms that shouldn't be able to breathe out. Well, you take a cautious step closer. One of the heads snaps in your direction, not fast, just curious. A warning, maybe, or a reflex. Scylla doesn't react. She hums again. The sound isn't sad, exactly. It's more like resigned. The melody of someone who's had eternity to process what they've become and decided that at least humming is better than screaming. And you, tiny mortal that you are, just stand there, because what do you say to something like her? Sorry? Nice cave? Do you need a snack? Instead, you sit down on a smooth rock, one that probably wasn't a sailor, and listen to the humming, to the wind, to the distant roar of Charybdis, far away and underwater, gnashing the sea like a hungry god. Eventually, Scylla turns not fast. Not dramatic, just enough to meet your eyes. There is no anger there, only understanding. While you stand, you nod. She nods back, barely, then you walk away. Not because you're scared, because you're no longer part of her song. And just like that, the journey ends, with a battle, with quiet. You're walking slower now. Your breath gentles. The monsters are behind you, not defeated, not even avoided. Just seen, met on their own terms. And maybe that's enough. The fog grows thicker, but it no longer feels threatening. It's soft, cool, like a blanket of mist meant only to wrap you up in quiet. Your feet sink slightly into moss with every step, each one quieter than the last, as if the path itself is tucking you in. Above, stars blink into place, familiar and far away, just specks watching you from a sky that's seen everything. Even the monsters. Especially the monsters. You sit on a low stone, worn smooth by centuries of forgotten travelers. Somewhere behind you, the last echoes of Scylla's humming fade into silence. Not because she stopped, but because you're no longer meant to hear it. The air is still. Your eyes begin to close, ending that space between waking and sleep. You realize something strange. You don't feel afraid of Typhon, of Medusa, even of the Sphinx, because even monsters, in the end, are just stories. And you're part of one now too. So rest easy, traveler. The night is long, and for now, it's yours.